I'm ready.
Hey guys, my name is Trae Bohlen. I'm a storyteller, brand photographer, and entrepreneur, and I love new beginnings. I love fresh starts, pivots, and everything that happens in the redirection and rebirth of businesses. Everyone has an origin story, and I'm super excited to introduce you to my friend JJ and get to know a little bit about his beginnings as an entrepreneur. So, I'd love to talk a little bit about the events that kind of shaped those beginnings for you. So, what inspired you to become an entrepreneur?
Hi, Trey. So, what inspired me to be an entrepreneur? That's a great question. I tell people, and this is a true story, ever since I was a young kid and I could pick up a crayon and piece of paper, all I wanted to do was draw and design things. I want to be a creator, and I just found such a passion in the arts that I just fell in love. And from there, I just never stopped being the art kid in class and always drawing, always doodling, always creating things and designing things to where at a very young age, I knew this is my passion, this is what I want to follow. So I never stopped following my dreams. And I even went to an art college to learn more of the technical side, develop the skills a little bit more. Even got a business degree and an MBA just so I could learn like the business and finances, and eventually pursue my dream of just running my own design company where I could still illustrate, still design, and still kind of that inner child, that dream, like just follow that passion and that determination.
It's amazing to see how something that you want to be when you're a kid, you can actually do. I think that's super encouraging for viewers to know is that your kids might have dreams and they can actually reach them. Maybe not everyone can be an astronaut, but just to think about your desire and what you wanted at a young age, you were able to follow. I don't know that everyone gets to do that. That's really amazing.
I agree, and thank you, Trey. And I try and give lectures even now all the time of telling people, what is your passion? What is it that you love? Because if there is something that you love, definitely follow it. Life is too short, and would you want to just constantly work at something you don't necessarily like and you just want to do something like over and over that may not be the most exciting? Or do you want to follow your dreams and passions and determination to actually make those dreams come true? And it could happen at any time. Every day we get a new opportunity to actually go down that road, to actually follow those steps. There's still going to be obstacles along the way, don't get me wrong, but every day you have the opportunity to make that happen.
Well, and I think that's so inspiring to think about. You liked art, but then you had the insight to say, but I need business classes too. You
Yes.
know, you were like, I maybe just art isn't enough. So did you have intuition that led you to that? Was there guidance? Did you have a mentor that recommended the business route?
Great question. So I did have mentors along the way. True story, when I was going to CCS, is I thought about my company way in advance, but something I noticed there is they had no business or marketing classes. And I thought to myself, well, you could be the most talented artist in the world, but if you don't know how to market yourself or actually think about just like the reality of just dealing with finances, bills, and trying to just like establish yourself, how do you really get yourself known? And I had a professor, I still run into him every once in a while, and I was talking to him about it. And he brought up, he goes, yeah, that's the one downside kind of here at this university, which is we teach a lot of the technical skills. But for people like you that want to be entrepreneurs and actually branch off and follow your dreams, that's the one thing that we're kind of missing.
Mm.
They were hoping to have something in the future, but it was at that moment I had my epiphany, which is okay, so I'm definitely here to learn the technical side. And it's still like a great opportunity that I have here, but I need to push myself even further if I
Mm.
am to achieve this dream, that I have the whole obstacle of learning finances and doing taxes and all the fun things um, that come with being an entrepreneur. But you know what?
Yeah.
It was worth it.
So you said you had to push yourself. Where did where did that strength come from to be able to push yourself?
Great question again. So my personal determination has just always been very strong. And again, like even as a young kid, I knew this is what I want to do, and I just tried everything I could to just make it happen, regardless of the obstacles. And I know with my determination, this it's just well, if I can't get what I'm looking for to advance to the next steps here at this university, then let me look at some other colleges and universities that are offering business courses Or is there any way that I could further my degree in order to learn this aspect, use the other side of my brain to
Yes.
actually, yes, actually achieve these goals? And, something I also talk about too, both in lectures and people just personally one on one, never stop pushing yourself towards growth. Never stop
Mm,
learning and never stop evolving. That's how we change as people, and that's how we broaden
yes.
our horizon, is by constantly teaching ourselves new things. So, with that mindset and going back, even though I'm just like, oh gosh, an art kid doing math, can I do this? I'm just like, you know what? Not only do I have to do this, but this is a great example of those words where I need to push myself in order to grow, in order to evolve. And I found out I'm actually really good at statistics, which who would have known being an art kid that I could do math?
Right. And you mentioned overcoming obstacles. What has been one of those big things that you've had to overcome becoming an entrepreneur in your life?
Business wise or personally or both?
Whatever you want to share.
Okay. Well, two things I would say. The business side is more just establishing myself,
Okay.
getting that recognition, because I will say, starting off as an entrepreneur, it's very difficult. And it's true
Mm,
statistically that usually it takes about 2 or 3 years to really establish yourself, your customers, really start getting yourself well known, and keep the reoccurring, just like rapport of people just coming in. Um,
yes.
so that
That's
was,
the origins, right?
yes, absolutely. So that was the biggest challenge of all, is just how do I establish myself
Mm,
and just make sure that, hey, this is year one. How do I get through to the next year? And on top of it, when I started my business in 2010, that's when Michigan had the really big recession.
yep. That was a rough time. Interestingly enough, that's when I started my first business out of at a very, very low time. My husband was laid off, and it's interesting how, like, what's that phrase? I think it's necessity is the birth of all invention. The desperation, the hard time, like that diamond's gonna become a diamond. Like you got to crush it. That was your experience as well.
It was, and that's actually a
Wow.
great metaphor, I will say, and I will piggyback off of that in the aspect that it does actually build us up as characters. It does make us diamonds, because in those desperate times and trying to just like pursue those dreams, you just try and think of every avenue possible and try many different things in order to try and just get to the next step, to point B, to point C, to
Mm,
point D, in order to try and make those dreams happen, and also for us to continue to survive in this world. So,
exactly.
yes,
Exactly. And I feel like the thing that we need to survive in this world is each other,
absolutely.
and community and bringing people around us. And I feel like you're great at community building. Where did you learn that?
Community building just over time. I'm very sociable. I love socializing, and just meeting new faces. More importantly, I love hearing people's backgrounds and stories
Mhm.
about how you became the person you are today. What is your passion? What is it that you love in this world? And everyone's got such a unique and interesting story. And may I tell a story
Yes,
example real quick?
please. I'd love to hear an example.
Okay, there's a gentleman named Brian who used to be my old work dad years ago, and I was doing a photography project with him, and somehow we got on Michigan law, and it's something I had to take while doing my MBA, is like learning about like Michigan rules as well as like marketing law rules and so on and so forth. So talking to him after a while, I stopped and we got very deep in Michigan law and just like laws in general, to the point where I stopped and said, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but it almost seems like you were a lawyer at one time. And I was just laughing, joking around, and he stopped and gave me a serious look. He goes, actually, JJ, I don't think I ever told you I was a criminal lawyer for over 10 years. And I stopped and I'm just like, Brian, what are you doing here doing photography? Shouldn't you be out like fighting crime or something?
Right.
Yes. And he actually went into it with me. He goes, actually, the story behind that is my mom and dad told me I had to be a lawyer. So I wanted
Wow.
to, yeah, please them. And even though I didn't necessarily like it, I'm just like, okay, I'm going to become a lawyer and I'm going to become a criminal lawyer. Passed the bar exam, did everything he had to. He goes, the first thing I found out about being a criminal lawyer is it's not fun being a criminal lawyer. Yes. And he was going on to say, even though I did it for 10 years, I wasn't happy. I didn't see my two girls grow up.
Wow.
My marriage was getting a little rocky just because I was never home. I was always in the courtroom. And eventually he stopped one day. He says, why am I doing this?
Mm,
Like, yeah, I'm making like decent money, but at the same time, I can't spend it. I'm always in the courtroom. My family's getting more distant
mhm,
from me. So
mhm.
one day he had the epiphany of just, oh my gosh, you know what? I did this for the wrong reasons. I did this
Wow.
because, I just wanted to validate my parents and get that validation.
Mhm.
But my passion is just photography and just keeping it simple. So he switched gears one day. One day he came in and he says, I quit. I'm never coming back, and picked up the camera again. And now he's got a great relationship with both his girls, and
Oh,
they're just doing great, and he's much happier.
well, and seeing how pursuing your passions and maybe what you were created to do, it it really can lead to that, like, fuller life, right?
Absolutely.
So I know that in the story you just shared, it seemed like he had this relationship with his parents where he was trying to do what they wanted to do. If you don't mind sharing, what is a little bit of your origin story as far as your background, your family life? If you want to get into that, if you don't want to get into that, but
Yes.
I feel like I know that you've kind of overcome some different obstacles, and I think it would be really encouraging for people to hear that.
Yes. Thank you, Trey. Well, I know that we have had deep conversations about this, but my background, grew up in Bingham Farm, so 13 Telegraph area, pretty nice neighborhood. Parents were both medical officers. Mom, who's still alive, she's a clinical pathologist, more specialized. My father was a family practice physician. Um, Dad was a nice gentleman. He passed away a few years ago, but had his own demons.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will say had difficulties, and some of his difficulties as being a doctor, you had access to narcotics and things of that
Mm,
nature. So he went down a dark path for a
yeah.
while on and off and became addicted to narcotics, which
Mm,
then would change his behavior, sometimes more violent and erratic.
mm,
So as a kid growing up, I was actually fearful of him for like the first 10 years of my life, like not
mhm.
knowing what I was going to get when I came home from like
Yes.
school. So that was difficult. On top of it, too, I mean, my mom is a very challenging person and not
Mm,
mentally well. Um,
mm,
More malice and
mm.
malicious intentions, unfortunately,
Yeah.
and they unfortunately don't want any help. So it
Yeah.
makes it very difficult as your kid just watching you go through things, and you have this philosophical moment of just, do you even realize what you're doing? Because in some
Mm,
ways you're being very hurtful. Um, and
yeah.
it's sad. It's sad. I've actually lost a lot of relationships because of my relationship with them, as well as it's made it a lot more challenging just growing up. Um, in some ways, I feel like things were extra hard because not only
Mm,
like an entrepreneur, especially like trying to establish your business, a lot of people deal with the personal things that are going on in their life. So with
yes.
me, I know I was affected, and I still get affected from time to time with their actions and choices that directly impact me, directly impact my company.
Mhm.
And I know that they tell you, especially in the workforce, leave your baggage at the door. But realistically, we're all human, so how can
Right.
they? Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So yeah, it's been very difficult at times, but I've learned to overcome them in a lot of ways, and now I see a lot more people kind of doing the same thing. And I try and just give
Mm,
them words of wisdom that, hey, regardless of what you're going through, it's only for now. It's only temporary. We just got to do the best we can each
mm.
day, and not every day is going to be great, and that's okay. It's okay to feel those emotions too. Our emotions are valid. Just I use the example all the time. If a tiger were to jump through like a window right now, I think a normal rational emotion would just be fearful and just be shocked and panic. If you weren't panicking, um,
Yeah.
I would think that'd be not normal.
Right. Right.
Yeah, yes. So it's okay for us to feel these emotions, but
Yeah.
that's what makes us human, helps us grow.
And it's all what you do with the emotions, right?
Exactly.
Like the emotions are telling us something, that something's wrong, that something's right, that something's good, that something's bad, and it's what you do with those afterwards. Um, Thanks for sharing that. I know that that's challenging to have that be in your background, but I wanted everyone to hear that because you can overcome things like that.
Absolutely.
Just because you might not have a good foundation doesn't mean that you can't build a new foundation.
Exactly. And something I bring up too is, remember, you can't change those people, but you could change yourself. You have
Mm,
the control every single day to start new. And some days are definitely going to be harder than others, but at the same time, every day we have the opportunity to change and evolve as people and do what's in our control, which is, hey, we could change ourselves. We can reprogram ourselves. But
yes,
yes, but it starts with you, and no one else could make you do it but yourself. So you got to have that mental motivation, determination to try and change.
exactly. And I like thinking about that when we're confronted with issues, with problems, with, being an entrepreneur and thinking, okay, like I can't change my clients, I can't change my customers, I can't change my teammates, I can't change my coworkers, I can only change me. So, what do I need to change in order to make this situation better, in order to make sales better, transactions better, in order to communicate better? What is missing and how can I be the thing that fixes it, right?
Exactly.
And that just makes you a better business person, honestly.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think just having empathy too, of just
Um,
every time you meet someone, they're fighting a battle you know nothing about that they may not necessarily share with you. In fact, most of the time, most people don't. But just the empathy of just putting yourself in their shoes and realizing, like, hey, they're a person just like me, just going through their
mhm.
own challenges. And as a business owner, we got to keep that in consideration when we're interacting with them, being sociable and try and relate to them.
Mm, such good insights. You've shared so many good things, but what do you think your superpower is?
That's a great question. So I would say it's two things. One is just determination. So I'm very determined to actually just get things done. And when I have a mindset of things that I want and goals that I
Mm,
want to achieve in this world, I am very determined to just go through with it and actually overcome those obstacles. The second thing I would say is what I just talked about is more empathy, is that I could
mhm,
empathize with people and put myself in their shoes, feel their emotions to a certain degree, and
mhm.
relate with them. And I think that's what makes me good and a lot more sociable, is where I could actually just be human with you, be vulnerable in those moments,
Yeah.
and just have that talk one on one.
Well, I think it's interesting to think about someone who's been through a lot. And usually people that have been through a lot wall up because it's safety and putting up barriers to protect themselves. And I feel like you have lowered the drawbridge and you've said, okay, I'm going to invite more in instead of walling up. And I think that's really rare and that's really a gift. And I just wanted to tell you that.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it, Trey. Well, I can see the same with you too, and I think that's what makes you so good at your business and so good at entrepreneur is you're very much a social butterfly. I'll say that, but
Definitely.
that's why people are drawn to you.
Thank you. As we've been sharing and talking about difficult things, we've shared about your origins, your past, some hardships and struggles. What do you do when something doesn't go right, when you have a failure? How do you overcome and what do you learn from that?
That's a great question. Well, I see everything in this world, it's meant to happen the way it should be. So everything
Mm,
does happen for a reason. Most of the time, it's for personal growth and for knowledge. So when something bad does happen, I
mm,
try and quickly think best case scenario of like how can I deal with the circumstance? How can I overcome it? How can I overcome it in a very professional and therapeutic way? Um, and constructive too, because some
yeah.
people aren't as constructive at handling
Mhm,
confrontation or dealing with those certain obstacles. But with me, I personally like to just take a moment, try and just like pause in my head and think about how can I overcome this again in such a constructive and professional way.
mhm,
Some things are definitely easier than others, but in the end, even if it doesn't go my way, my new philosophy is try not to think about it, try not to dwell on it and hook
mm.
on these thoughts about everything that went wrong, and think about like the right in it, if that makes sense. So think
No, it
about
does.
yes, think about like, okay, this is a learning lesson, and what can I take from this? So let's say I did have a scenario recently. A new customer I had seemed like a nice gentleman, didn't pay his bill, and it's been like 3 months later.
Oh,
And I think to myself, I could be upset and I could
yeah.
chase after him, but at the same time, it just shows that he just has a little bit of a bad character.
Mm,
It's not anything that I did wrong, and I could chase after him and dwell that did I do something wrong? And I know that I did everything right. And he was very happy with the product so much that he, yeah, took the product and ran. So I know I did good. But at the same time, too, it's just like, well, I mean, it's not great, but I could learn
Yeah.
a lesson that, maybe I need to just, I don't know, keep this in consideration for the future
Yeah.
moving forward and think of just like certain safety plans to
Right.
where, yeah, it doesn't happen again. We get burned.
Yeah, and like adjusting your SOP and thinking, okay, maybe there's a different way to do this that won't end in that result again, you know,
Exactly.
to
Exactly.
and I think too, like protecting your client, protecting yourself. I think as entrepreneurs, sometimes we don't always think both ways. We're thinking all about the client and not enough about ourselves, or all about protecting ourselves and not about enough about the client. So
Exactly.
I think we're always in a juggling act trying to balance those things.
We are. We are. We're always juggling, and not everything's gonna be perfect, but all we can do again is the best we can.
Yeah, that beautifully said. What advice would you give to someone who was aspiring to be an entrepreneur, like just starting out, baby entrepreneur? What would be your best advice for them?
There's two things that come to mind. The first thing is what I like to tell people all the time with my personal experiences, which is if you're passionate about something, if you love something so much, never give it up. Always try and
Mhm.
pursue it and always follow your dreams, whatever they may be. Even if you want to be, I know this is probably silly, but even if you want to be like someone like a garbage man, if that's your passion, then hey, who am I to say that's wrong? And at the same time, too, follow your dreams and be the best garbage person you could be. And whatever the career is, whatever the passion is, you know what? I support you 100% and just try and be the best you could be in that field
Mhm.
and be happy.
Yes, do it with all your heart. That's such a biblical concept of like doing everything with a full heart, wholeheartedly. We're working and serving and striving to do everything that we can to better the people around us and to work for others. I think that's
Exactly.
amazing.
Thank you. And I do have one other thing that I tell people all the time too, which is what is your value?
Mm,
A lot of people don't necessarily know their values. A lot of people actually don't necessarily what the definition of a value is. And I
mhm.
like to explain it to them like values versus needs and wants.
Yeah.
And what are your values? Because if you're going to be an entrepreneur and you're going to represent your own brand, what is your brand and what is your value? Yeah, it's something to really consider.
Yes, exactly. And funny you should mention that. That's what I love helping people with, right? Uncovering those foundational things so that they can build a brand, so they can tell their story, so they can confidently share that. And it's interesting because I don't know that a lot of people have thought deeply about that, especially in the beginning. You're like, I just want to be an artist. I just want to be a performance piano player and sell courses about playing the piano, or these wide range of things. And we don't always think about the brand story, the brand values, the foundation. What are you doing that's actually more than what you're doing, if that makes sense?
Yes, yes, it does.
Oh, and I think you said that so beautifully. So can you sum up what you do in 20 words or less? I know I like to play this little game.
Yes. Believe it or not, I was thinking about it when you originally sent me the questions. So I would say, in a few words, I love to build brands through digital media, but more importantly, I build long lasting relationships.
That's beautifully said.
Yeah.
And it sums up what you do exactly. I would love to ask you, where can people get connected with you? What's the best way for them to find out more about Lakehouse Studios?
Yes. So the best way to learn more about Lakehouse is probably going to our website at lhs-dmg.com. Also, you can find us on social media. I'm a social butterfly, so we're on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, even TikTok. Oh, and YouTube, we're on there as well. So any one of those channels, we're definitely on there. If you just type in Lake House Studios, and those are probably the best ways to find me and get a hold of me.
And one last question. What is your favorite kind of client?
That's a very good question, Trey. My favorite kind of client is someone who's just down to earth, who I could build a relationship with. And as you brought up, I mean, like, kind of like lowering that bridge to where we could get more personable and I feel like really get to know each other just to
Mm,
make sure we're a good fit. I think that's my ideal client. Now, I know back in the day, like the entrepreneur, like starting off business, just like, oh no, my target audience has to be someone within
mhm.
this range, this age,
Yes.
so on and so forth. But realistically, as you get older, now I just like working with down to earth individuals
Mhm.
that are like minded like myself.
Exactly. No, I think that's such good advice. I don't think about demographics anymore. I think about sociographics.
Yes, exactly. And that's a
And
great way
I
to
and
put
I
it.
think it's maybe it's a new way of thinking, or maybe it's just how I think, how people like us think. We want to connect with people. And you and I'm sure we're thinking about things the same similarly. You know right away whether or not you've made a connection
Yes,
and if
exactly.
it's going to be a good fit.
Exactly.
And I have also found too that like my best yes is actually saying no to the things that won't serve us both.
Yes, I would agree with that.
And I really appreciate your time and just sharing so open-heartedly with everybody. And I'm just really excited to be able to interview you. And thanks so much for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me, Trey. It's always a pleasure seeing you. It's always great talking with you. This was such a great opportunity, and just thank you so much for having me.
Yes, and please like, subscribe, follow, share, and join me next time for my next origin story.
Excellent. Well, perfect.